Oh, hello everyone. I'm Jo Butler-Green, member of Devon Dowsers, and it's my pleasure to talk with Guy Hudson, a professional water dowser with close links to Village Water and a joint founder of Water Dowsing Africa. Good evening, Guy. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you, and thank you for interviewing me, Joe Butler Green.
It's a complete pleasure. So, by way of background, I did actually interview you earlier this year as you were planning your trip to Western Province in Zambia. And that trip was aiming to support and train remote communities to accurately locate potable water in underground aquifers. So I know you've recently come back from that important field trip, which was generously funded by the dowsing community and beyond. So I'm interested to know now how your trip came about. Can you briefly explain how it came about?
Okay, well, so I helped start up Village Water in 2004, and it's been a great success. I resigned. I was trustee for 13 years, resigned 10 years ago to hand over to a new crew. They have been absolutely incredible. And as we will talk about later, they're very accurate database for their couple of thousand of wells that they've renovated and or dug and put new wells in, and done hygiene and sanitation in all these different villages. They have now reached 1.1 million people. So they've actually affected, both Zambia and Mozambique quite significantly, from very, very modest beginnings with just three of us dowsers going out to Western Province in Zambia in 2004.
Incredible.
It's a significant achievement, and thanks all the dowsing community for all the support they've given us over the years.
So you wanted to go back and re-establish those dowsing links?
We did, or I did, and other dowsers, famously Peter Taylor, amongst others, has been disappointed that Village Water no longer emphasise the dowsing links, and we thought it was time to re-establish this. And I was a bit worried about going out there because as Village Water, we stopped bringing people out to look at what was going on because it's got in the way. There's so much work to do with a tight schedule for each village that having visitors didn't help. So we stopped doing it. So I got special permission from Claire Weirden to see whether it would be helpful for me to go out there and to see whether dowsing could be useful again. And luckily she said yes. And then I got great help from Alan Murray in setting up Dowsing for Africa and collecting contributions from dowsers, from the dowsing community in the UK, which is great because it means that we as dowsers in the UK have successfully re-established this link to Village Water.
So you had some doubts before you actually went out to Zambia, but once you actually got there, how did those expectations and doubts, did they dissolve? Did you find that the reality on the ground was very different once you actually arrived?
I didn't know, really. I had sort of crisis of confidence. I didn't really know what use a visitor from Europe would honestly help with people on the ground, where lots of wells needed fixing and lots of hygiene and sanitation training needed to be done. So how could I help? And would I help? And also, as you'll see later, that on the particular the South African project was a complete unknown. I'd never been to South Africa before, and I really didn't know what I'd be doing, where I'd be, or anything. Anyway, so I had a bit of a crisis of confidence, and it was pretty tricky these days getting a good deal on airfares. and pretty complex. So many
Yes,
options.
I'm sure.
And next time I do that, I'm going to get some help. So
Go
yeah,
to a travel agent.
I was terribly lacking in confidence before I went,
Mm, mm.
but I had my dowsing rods, had some coat hangers and a pair of pliers, and my experience as a dowser. What more did I need?
Nothing more. So when you when you arrived, how were you and your dowsing skills received?
Well, I was booked into a hotel which was close to the operations office for Village Water, in Lusaka, as the capital of Zambia. And the hotel was surprisingly good. I mean, it was really, I was expecting, a budget basic thing, what they call guest houses there in Zambia, um, where with just a bed and breakfast. But this was a proper hotel. And walking from the reception 100 meters to my room, I came across a herd of impala, as one does, and these gorgeous little animals with bright, starry eyes, looking more Bambi-like than Bambi, which were very skittish. So the slightest movement from me,
Yes.
they responded to. It was absolutely lovely. Anyway, so I had a good night's sleep. I'm recovered from the journey, and went into the offices of Echo. Echo are the company set up by a long-term manager of Village Water called Mubiana. I always remember him giving a wonderful speech in a conference room in the House of Lords, extolling the virtues of the work that Village Water
Yeah.
did. Incredible, very, very accomplished manager is our Mubiana. And so Annie, the manager of Echo, was expecting me, and she gave me a lovely welcome and introduced me to everybody, including to 3 staff on the ground floor, who were called enumerators. And I thought, well, good heavens, I've never met an enumerator before. What's an enumerator? And so it turned out that we set up this database from day one in Zambia, which specified, what the name of the village was, where it was, the geographical coordinates, how many people were living there, what was the condition of the well, or did it need a well, and what was the status for the hygiene and sanitation, i.e., were there enough latrines, were they being used, were people washing their hands, and all that kind of stuff. And so every village was tracked like that. And so when I resigned as a trustee 10 years ago, after 13 years experience, I handed over to the very, very competent new crew. And when I was getting familiar with Village Water again, I was amazed to find that in the database, which was pretty accurate, that they had reached 1.1 million people, both in Zambia and now the new area in Mozambique. And so I just couldn't believe this. It was just such a large number. The couple of thousand wells you need without that database was, and what was borne out, incredible. When I went out into the field and visited some villages, the pumps that I was with the team that they were repairing had only been broken for 2 days. So they've got, a couple of thousand wells out there, and they've got these teams that are ready to go and fix them within a couple of days of them breaking down. When they can. Obviously, some are inaccessible or whatever, or some of the problems which are a bit more fundamental, and you can't just maintain it by changing parts on the pump, or wells collapsed or something like that. Whereas when we started, actually in the field, 95% of the wells weren't working. They're all broken down from lack of maintenance. Now, all the villages that have come into the Village Water Scheme are a part of the database. 96% of them are working, which is just such a turnaround. It's not only visiting all those people, but it's ongoing. And the reason is they really do need to do that, because as soon as the pump is broken, the well isn't functioning, then people have to, obviously they got to drink, so they go back to the old polluted streams, and people get ill immediately.
Yes.
Immediately, everybody.
Yes.
So
Yes.
it's terribly important that that they are fixed quickly, and it seems that they are really fixed quickly, and they're a good team of people too. Anyway, so while I was talking to the enumerators, Annie, as I said, I explained what I'd come for, to train people to dowse, and she thought I'd come for something else, which was also another function I was doing, which was to educate people about iron being in the water, having had a briefing from an expert in the UK. And she said, "Oh, dowsing. Oh, well, if I ever hear one of our big drillers talking about dowsing, I completely ignore it because it's unscientific." I thought, oh no, I've come halfway around the
Why have I
world,
come?
and I'm not really
Yes.
terribly sure of myself anyway. And she said she ignores it. Oh no, what am I going to do? Anyway, so but what it did show is that where they use big drillers, so basically their main activities are in two provinces. One is in Western Province, where it's shallow sand wells, or in Central Province, nearer Lusaka, where some of the wells are really deep. They can be 70 meters deep, and you've got to drill through bands of rock. So there's no way you can do manual drilling, which is obviously a fraction of the price, and uses local drilling teams. Except you have to get a big truck and a team of professional drillers to do that. And just like in the UK, professional drillers with big expensive trucks actually use dowsing, so that minimizes their chance of the disastrous dry well syndrome, and they do too. And so, although she had a negative message, actually it was very positive. It told me that dowsing is used just like in the UK, in Zambia, and that more than that, when I got out into the field next day via this deeply, literally shocking 10-hour bus ride on very, very dodgy roads with no suspension on the bus, and was rather hot in the bus as well. So anyway, after this shocking ride, it was 500 kilometers for 23 quid, and there was still bad value for money. Anyway, it was anyway. So I got there and met the team out in the field in the regional capital or Western Province called Mongu, which is a lovely city, and met this incredibly strong team. So there were there was the database coordinator, there was technology expert on manual drilling, because there are 7 different ways you can do manual drilling. He was an expert on all of those. Also with pump fixing, he was a really quick and good pump fixer. Really excellent driver, which are not just drivers, but they're odd job men, and they fix stuff and find stuff and just generally make things happen. He was a lovely driver. Also, one of the most enthusiastic dowsers and one of the best dowsers of all, the whole team. And they all took to the idea of dowsing like mad. They were really keen. So I gave them a quick training on the first day, and on the on the second day we went out to a broken well, to an area where David Dixon, the leader of Village Water UK, was absolutely had a bee in his bonnet about crossing the Zambezi. And in those days, you had to put your 4x4 on a raft and get it rowed across the Zambezi, as it was logistically quite an exercise to do that. And we went to these villages. But now, since then, in the intervening years, 15 years, the Chinese have put in bridges and a toll road across the Zambezi, across to Angola, and we were able to visit them, within an hour's drive, and went out there and saw these wells that had just broken down due to iron content in the water. Actually, had rotted the pipes, and so replaced the pipes, replaced the cylinder, took it all apart, put it back together again in record time. A couple of hours was all it took. They're really skilled at what they're doing. It's very impressive. But also the education lady, very, very well educated, very, very personable, was who did all the hygiene and sanitation education, was a really enthusiastic dowser. And as soon as I taught her, she started teaching the villagers, and they were taking it all on, get very excited. What, really? You can find water, and you can find the depth and the quantity. This is incredible. God, this is so useful. And anyway, so there was a real buzz about it. It was like, so my rods, which are the good old fashioned BSD copper 5mm copper welding rods, belted in an L shape, got, during the 2 weeks I was in Africa, got absolutely shiny pink, because it wasn't just me using them. Everybody else wanted to go and was constantly borrowing them. So I've got an old archer's quiver. I keep them in, and it's easy to pull them out. And every time I went down to sort of use and demonstrate them, someone was off the other side of the village trying them out. It was amazing. So there was an incredible willing take up of dowsing, and a real demand and need to know. And what was critical about it, out in Western Province, they use manual drilling, as per the expert there. A very personal young chap called Hendrix, and he'd never heard of Jimi Hendrix either, which was a bit strange. But anyway, I will educate him. He anyway, so the difference is so that the big professional boys working in Central Province were using dowsing, but the manual drillers didn't have that skill. And it's just as useful, obviously, for the manual drillers as it is for the big boys. And so incredibly useful. And they really latched onto it. They said, yeah, this is good. We need this. Please show us how. And the thing I learned was it's really quick to teach newbies how to, or ab initios, to find where the water is. Actually getting consistent results of loads of people you're training. So I was training half a dozen at a time. To get consistency over depth and quantity isn't achieved immediately.
Okay.
And so I need to perfect ways of doing that.
Is that a question of practice, or does it boil down to sort of finding the method of teaching that sort of resonates with the people you're working with?
Okay, what I found when teaching, so I taught some BSD courses in Malvern earlier this year, and what I found was that people tend to have a sort of calibration factor. So if they always say, when you go the depth, you walk out the bishop's rule, they always get it twice the distance. So if it was like 3 meters down, they went 6.
Okay.
But they would kept doing the same factor all the time. And so, and I think that's true. And I'd like to experiment with that. And so there's a big need for me to go back and to finish off the training. But before I do that, I've got to convince myself and the dowsing community how best to quickly train it, given that I've got a couple of hours probably in the field, and with no messing about. There's a 4x4 there, and it's just there while they're doing their other stuff.
Yeah.
And I've got that time before we've got to get going again. Before to know that I've taught them okay, and also I can demonstrate to the others that I've taught it, so that I'll be training the teachers and I'll be training the people out in the field. Yeah, really interesting and very, very rewarding exercise. And Well, there's going to be any uh, would you know any sorry, I just had a message. I just interrupted my train of thought. And yeah, so yeah, very, very necessary. And I needn't have been worried at all. Dowsing,
That's wonderful.
Dowsing continues to
Mm.
be utterly critical, utterly essential.
So hopefully you can maybe have some courses running in the UK before you go back to Africa to practice your teaching of depth and volume.
Yeah, to get some really good ideas. So
Yeah.
I've already started talking to some of the dowsing trainers,
Mm.
John Baker, for instance,
Mm.
on how best he thinks to do that. And what I will do that is I'll get ideas from you know the really experienced teachers, and I will try them out on courses so that
Yes.
I need to raise some money to pay my some of my costs at least,
Mm.
for going out there as soon as possible, fairly early next
Mm.
year, I hope,
Mm.
and to go back to both Zambia and South Africa.
Yeah.
And that's what
The courses will help
that's the next
to fund
stage.
that. Yes. So you mentioned South Africa. So how did that particular leg of the adventure come about?
Well, my late wife's my late wife's work involved leading having a strategic role in a charity called Slow Food. And they wanted to, I was invited out to a conference earlier this year to award a prize in her name. And while I was there at dinner, I met this lady who was helping to run a charity, a big charity in a very effective and well-run charity in South Africa that were running 400 different projects. So there were kind of like 400 villages involved. So we're at the kind of scale of village water, except that the conditions in South Africa are very different. Hugely greater infrastructure. So in the villages in in Zambia, I've only got what they've got there. So they've got tall grass. That's what they make their houses out of. And village water is able to import expensive, very, very durable metal pumps, which can last 50 years or more. But in South Africa, there are water utility companies that have got pipe networks, providing household drinking water, to the majority of households in the majority of villages in South Africa, even really remote. But and the market gardening and allotment type schemes that this charity I was working with called Sociotech rely on are no longer reliable because of the massive drought in South Africa. And so there's interrupted supply of water by these utility companies. Also, it's getting really expensive, and they're putting in water meters, and the locals don't have the currency the cash to actually buy the water for their vegetables. Okay, for drinking, for vegetables. And so what is required is each household to douse for its own water, and there's a lot of groundwater there, and a lot of it's very shallow. Even in the Kalahari. So I got on a plane heading south, to Johannesburg or Joburg, and I was met there by the lady who was running this, and she said she would drive me around and she'd look after me and all that stuff. I was just taking a word. I was just going there, kind of completely not knowing what was planned, and she had everything planned. So that evening, I met the head of the charity, very, very impressive lady. they take money from the big corporations there, the mining corporations and the big corporations, for improving the conditions in society in the local villages. And the key way of doing that is to introduce, just as in Zambia with entrepreneurial well digging and pump mending teams, here is getting people to do entrepreneurial stuff to grow food for themselves and to sell in the local markets. And the land is pretty fertile, and of course there's plenty of sunshine. There I was teaching dowsing in 45 degrees centigrade. One of
Unbelievable.
the witty people, very, very intelligent people I was working with, while I had to dive into the car and put the aircon on to cool down a bit because I was fading. He said, "Oh dear, we've killed the Englishman." He did as well. Anyway, so gosh, the countryside. Oh, what we did. So the next morning. So having met the CEO of the charity and understanding how they work and the scale of what they're doing, and very, very tightly run, very expert, very good at one side communicating with the big corporations, and on the other side, motivating teams and organizing teams on how to get the projects going in all the individual villages. Very, very impressive. Anyway, so straight early start. Come on, guys, time to get up, have your shower, and we'll get going. Anyway, so jumped straight in the car, and oh god, she's got a 2-year-old car that's got 167,000 kilometers on the clock, and I know why. We're off. So it was straight on, no non-stop, apart from to buy some delicious biltong, as one does in South Africa, right to the Kalahari. So we drove right across the border of the northern border of South Africa, from Johannesburg across to the Kalahari, and so went to this village, and we visited 3 separate villages. But one was particularly memorable. There was a lady there who was a granddaughter of a Kalahari bushman who lived in a cage in one of the local mountains, who was a very, very impressive character, and had the classic apricot colouring of a Kalahari bushman. And impressive character. She was leading a local charity on trying to keep youth away from drugs and drink, which you know it is when you take away people's land and they've got to lose their meaning in life and their point in society. They all over the world, the indigenous people tend to turn to drink and drugs, and the whole point was to give them a purpose, to some entrepreneurial thing, to grow food. And of course, because of the drought and the lack of the ability of these utility companies to deliver water, and for weeks at a time not to have it, so suddenly, if you're trying to irrigate plants and you haven't got water for a week or two, and that heat, they're all gone. And so therefore, there's a desperate and urgent need for a large-scale initiative to train people to douse. But also, I met a designer, engineer, who had worked out how to make a plastic pump out of drain pipes for about £15. So if you combine that, the ability for people to find water and depth it and find the suitable place, and then you can use manual drilling techniques, all the different sorts, again can be developed, with a hand pump that costs just a few pounds, as opposed to the big metal ones that were used in Zambia, because they're make sure that you've got sterile water where out in the bush. Whereas here we've got the drinking and cooking water is there, provided by the utilities, but the volume stuff where you can, is needed. So with dowsing and combined
Yes.
with manual pumps. So completely different requirements, equally critical, absolutely life-saving or economy saving, or whatever you want to call it, in
Yes.
situations. Very, very different. But dowsing is equally important and critical part of both. And what's interesting in the village water situation, because dowsing is so quick and easy, it's a 10-minute job in a sort of 9-month program. It's easily forgotten,
Yes.
and
I understand that.
absolutely critical. So we're refreshing the skills of the manual drillers in Zambia, and here working with people who are developing manual drilling techniques combined with cheap pumps. It's providing a very modern, immediate, relevant solution to what is really, really critical stuff to a very large quantity of people.
So you think you were able to stress the added value that dowsing can bring to these different issues and situations?
I didn't need to.
You didn't
Everyone
need to.
realised it was just
It was just obvious.
utterly obvious. Everyone saying, "Well, you can do that, can you?" Ah,
Yes.
right. But again, I need to perfect
Mm.
the depthing and the quantifying of yield.
Yes. So I'm going to ask you, going forward then, how are you going to develop the opportunities that have arisen from your work in Africa and ensure that the benefits of your dowsing training are sustained and developed?
Well, what we showed last year, actually, by the work of John Baker, was that there is a significant demand for dowsing training.
Yeah.
What I want to do, so I've actually over the years trained several hundred people to douse, and for the BSD and for myself and for others. And what I want to do is to work with the local dowsing groups through Sed Jackson and his newsletter to go around the country and do courses like I did before I left for Africa, to the course that you,
Yes.
Joe, attended with the
Yes.
Devon Dowsers,
Sprayton, yeah.
which, even though there were a lot of really expert dowsers there, we all got something from it, I think,
Absolutely, we did.
and we had great fun. And so I've got a specific mission, and that is to perfect how to teach depthing and quantification of yield as quickly as possible and as reliably as possible, and to get people accurate and confident in that. So that's my mission. And so I hope that people will find, whether they're rank beginners or they're really experienced dowsers, there's a lot to work on, and it's very significant. And also, it will be hopefully helping to fund my next trip.
Sure, because there are lots of opportunities, lots of avenues that you could pursue in both Zambia and South Africa. It must be difficult to know exactly where you're going to go next with the dowsing. Obviously, going back to refresh training and advanced training with the same groups of people, do you think?
Well, certainly them, and whatever else we can coordinate. I mean, imagine
Yes.
With in the field in Zambia, out in Western Province, we can just do village after village
Yeah.
with the tight little team that they've got
Yes.
in Mongo, of really people, and it would be good. There will be other teams. I don't quite know where they are in Zambia, and get them on board as well. Make sure they've got some decent rods, and
Yes.
and take them through a quick training program,
Have,
maximum
have,
a day.
have you heard if the people you trained are actually using their skills now out in the field? You had any feedback yet?
I haven't actually. I haven't. I've been in. I've just had a lot of really incredible stuff. So I've
Yes.
had a very, very full diary ever since I've been back.
Yes.
but it's soon I will be getting back there and looking for their feedback, and I'll keep via SED's newsletter. I will keep people updated.
So thanks ever so much, Guy. It's really, really interesting to hear about your Zambian and South African adventures, and I really hope to be able to check in with you again in 2023 to discuss your future dowsing trips. So thanks so much on behalf of the dowsing community.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.